Call from Punjabi Kangaroo. As usual, ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਫੇਰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਨਵਾਂ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਹਾਂ but today we will be talking about employer sponsor visa. Last time we ਅਸੀਂ employer sponsor visa ਬਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ but we talking about in detail and there are two other employer sponsors visa. And with that, today I have Rajan Goyal sir with me. Before starting, I would like to welcome him. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Ravneet ji. Punjabi Kangaroo ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਰੋਤਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ and I hope all of you are doing very well. Welcome to the program.
So let's start this program, and first of all I would like to ask you what are the different types of employer sponsors visas, because we talked about training visa 407 and temporary employer sponsor visa 482 in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So Ravneet ji, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਕਿ in the skilled migration sector WA state is presently suspended. ਤਾਂ WA state ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ invitation issue ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ and we are not sure when the WA state is going to reopen. ਤਾਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਬੜੀ uncertainty ਹੈ ਸਾਡੀ ਜੋ bulk of the queries ਹੈ ਜੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਹੈ for people who have completed their studies, people who are on 485 जो आपदी field जो job भी कर रहे हैं but they do not know what to do further because states are suspended and even in the 189 sector only critical occupations are being invited. Majority of the queries, as I said, यही आ रही हैं कि what should we do for our PR. ਅਸੀਂ यही stress कर रहे हैं, we are recommending it very strongly कि employer sponsored visas ਵੱਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰੀਏ ਸਾਰੇ, because you never know ਕਿ during this pandemic ਜਿਵੇਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਿ state suspended ਹੈ, ਕਦੋਂ reopen ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਕੀ criteria ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ, ਕਿਹੜੇ occupation lists ਆਉਂਦੇ ਹੈ. And employer sponsored visa is one visa ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ PR availability ਰਹੂਗੀ in majority of the occupations and एक ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ pathway ਹੈ जो कि हमेशा ही डिमांड च रहूगा because employers will always need workers from outside Australia as workers in Australia are not sufficient for the purposes of running their businesses. We've got 4 different types of employer sponsored visas. Number 1 would be training visa, which is subclass 407, and then we've got subclass 482, which is TSS visa, temporary skills shortage visa, which was introduced in 2018. And we've got the regional employer sponsored visa, which is called subclass 494. And then we've got the permanent employer sponsored visa, which is called subclass 186. So in सारे वीज़ा दी आपदी eligibility criteria है, depending upon your circumstances कि तुसी कित्थे खड़े हो, you should be able to apply for one of these visas if an employer is willing to sponsor you.
So actually I would like you to talk about 494 and 186 in detail because we have already talked about 407 and 482.
Yeah, certainly. 494 हैगा एक regional employer sponsored visa है for employers who are based in the regional Australia. Now entire Australia is regional at this point in time except for Sydney and Melbourne and metropolitan Brisbane. ये बहुत वास्ट एरिया कवर करता है एम्प्लॉयर स्पॉन्सर्ड वीजा. इंटायर WA where we are sitting right now is regional. कोई भी एम्प्लॉयर जो कितने भी बेस्ड है ना एरियाज, they can actually sponsor the candidate for this visa. ते 494 visa the ਜਿਹੜੀ list applicable है, that is called regional occupation list, which is a very very vast list. तकरीबन सारी ऑक्यूपेशन उस लिस्ट च आ जाते हैं. ते 494 वीजा एक ऐसा वीजा है जो जेड़ा कि मतलब इट विल लीड टू PR eventually. It is a temporary visa. It is a 5-year temporary visa where you'll have to work for the employer in the same occupation for at least 3 years, and after you fulfill this condition 3 years the condition ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ PR ਲਈ directly apply ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ 494 ਚ. And one more thing, sorry to interrupt you. Criteria, just to touch upon the eligibility criteria for the applicants who are applying for the 494 visa. So you need to have 3 years of experience in the occupation that you are nominating for the visa. So let's say somebody is being nominated as a chef. ਤੇ ਉਸ ਸ਼ੈਫ ਲਈ ਸਪਾਂਸਰ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ EMPLOYER, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਸ਼ੈਫ 3 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਦਿਖਾਣਾ ਪਊਗਾ ਫੁੱਲ ਟਾਈਮ ਦਾ। ਉਹ 3 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਇਕੁਇਵਲੈਂਟ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ, ਮਤਲਬ ਇਕੁਇਵਲੈਂਟ ਪਾਰਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਜੇ 6 ਸਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ 3 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਫੁੱਲ ਟਾਈਮ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਜਾਊਗਾ। ਤੇ ਪਲੱਸ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਕਿੱਲਸ ਅਸੈਸਮੈਂਟ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲੀ ਲੈਣੀ ਪਊਗੀ। ਨਾਰਮਲੀ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਜਿਹਨਾਂ ਬੰਦਾ ਨੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ 'ਚ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਈ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਕੋਰਸਿਸ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਜਾਂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਉਹ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਕਿੱਲਸ ਅਸੈਸਮੈਂਟ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਲੇਕਿਨ ਸਪੋਜ਼ ਕਰੋ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਓਵਰਸੀਜ਼ ਕੁਆਲੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਬੇਸਿਸ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਸਕਿੱਲ ਅਸੈਸਮੈਂਟ ਪਾਉਣੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਲੋੜ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਨੰਨਦਲੈਸ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਵਾਸਤੇ 3 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਦਿਖਾਉਣਾ ਪਊਗਾ।
For all the visas or all of them have different
ਨਹੀਂ, ਬਹੁਤ ਅੱਛਾ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ। ਤਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਜੋ 3 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਹਰੇਕ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਪੂਰਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਪਾਊਗਾ। ਤਾਂ ਵਾਟ ਇਜ਼ ਦ ਪਾਥਵੇ ਟੂ ਦ 494 ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਟ੍ਰੇਨਿੰਗ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਫਰਮ ਅੰਡਰ ਐਨ EMPLOYER। ਟ੍ਰੇਨਿੰਗ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸਿਰਫ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਰੀਸੈਂਟ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਇਨ ਯੋਰ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਟਡ ਆਕੂਪੇਸ਼ਨ। ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ 485 ਤੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੈ ਉਹ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ 485 ਤੇ ਈਜ਼ੀਲੀ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਆਪਦੇ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਟਡ ਆਕੂਪੇਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ। ਦੇ ਕੈਨ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਫॉर द ਟ੍ਰੇਨਿੰਗ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦੈਨ, ਐਂਡ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਉਹ ਟ੍ਰੇਨਿੰਗ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਤੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈ। ਦੈਨ ਦੇ ਕੈਨ ਪੋਸੀਬਲੀ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਫॉर द 482 ਵੀਜ਼ਾ। ਉਹ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ 482 ਤੇ ਐਡੀਸ਼ਨਲ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈ। ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ 3 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਬੜਾ ਈਜ਼ੀਲੀ ਫੁਲਫਿਲ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। although it seems long but it doesn't long, ਮਤਲਬ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਫੁੱਲ ਟਾਈਮ ਪੇ ਮਿਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, you are working, and after 3 years you'll become eligible for 494 and eventually PR as well.
So Rajanji, the major problem is like people don't have full working rights.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just work for part-time or they just work casual. So what they can do in this situation?
ਰਵਨੀਤ ਜੀ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਜੋ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਦੀ ਰਿਕੁਆਇਰਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ, it can be part-time equivalent as well, especially for 494. ਤਾਂ ਜੋ ਪਾਰਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਵਰਕ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਪਾਰਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਲੱਗੂਗਾ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਦੇ ਕੈਨ ਸਟਿਲ ਫੁਲਫਿਲ ਦ ਰਿਕੁਆਇਰਮੈਂਟਸ। ਲੈਟਸ ਸੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਕੋਲੇ 485 18 ਮਹੀਨਿਆਂ ਦਾ 485 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਈ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ, ਤਾਂ ਓਬਵੀਅਸਲੀ 18 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦਾ ਉਹ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਸ ਤੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ। ਹਲੇ ਵੀ ਜੋ 2 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਰਿਕੁਆਇਰਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ, ਬਾਕੀ ਰਿਕੁਆਇਰਮੈਂਟ ਟ੍ਰੇਨਿੰਗ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਜਾਂ 482 ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਤੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਟਾਈਮ ਵਰਕਿੰਗ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਓਬਵੀਅਸਲੀ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਦੀ ਰਿਕੁਆਇਰਮੈਂਟ ਉੱਥੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ।
And what if ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ employer ਨੇ like in between they just stopped, like they just said like oh they can't sponsor them anymore, or ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ reason ਕਰਕੇ applicant ਨੂੰ job leave ਕਰਨੀ ਪਈ, then what can they do in such situation?
Well, obviously in employer sponsored visa, when you're committing for 2 to 3 years for an employer, things may go wrong. ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੌਬ ਛੱਡਣੀ ਵੀ ਪੈ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਬਿਜ਼ਨੈਸਿਸ ਡਾਊਨ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈ, ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਬੀ ਮੇਡ ਰਿਡੰਡੈਂਟ, ਬਟ ਦੈਟ ਡਜ਼ਨਟ ਮੀਨ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਾਰੇ ਆਪਸ਼ਨਸ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੈ। ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਸਟਿਲ ਆਪਟ ਫॉर ਅ ਨਿਊ EMPLOYER। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ EMPLOYER ਚੇਂਜ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਪਾਉਣੀ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਜ਼ ਵਨ ਆਫ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸਿਸ ਦੈਟ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਗੋ ਥਰੂ ਇਨ ਦਿਸ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਐਪਲੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ। ਤਾਂ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਪਾਸੇ, ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਕੂਪੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਚੇਂਜ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਸਟਿਲ ਪੁੱਟ ਅਪ ਅ ਨਿਊ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਂਡ ਨਿਊ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਐਪਲੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ, ਬਟ ਐਟ ਦ ਸੇਮ ਟਾਈਮ ਇਫ ਇਟਸ ਜਸਟ ਅ ਚੇਂਜ ਆਫ EMPLOYER ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਿਊ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਪਾਓ, you don't even have to put up a new visa application and you can continue with your visa conditions and ਉਹ ਜੋ 3 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੋ ਪੀਰੀਅਡ ਸਪੈਂਡ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਹੈ, that doesn't get ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹ ਉਵੇਂ ਕੰਟੀਨਿਊ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਊਗਾ।
So that continues, they don't have to start.
No, they do not have to start from the scratch. That's absolutely right if they are changing employers.
Yeah. So let's take some questions now. The question is by Rajan Rampal. Tell something about 186.
Rajan ji, thank you for your question. So 186 is a permanent employer sponsored visa. So the list applicable to 186 is MLT SSL list. If you just go onto the website of the Department of Home Affairs and search for MLT SSL list, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਉੱਥੇ ਲਿਸਟ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਊਗੀ। ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ occupations ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ you can nominate any one of those occupations on that list for 186 permanent employer sponsored visa. ਇਹਦੀ ਜੋ ਮੇਨ ਐਲੀਜੀਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਟੇਰੀਆ ਹੈ that is very similar to 494 regional employer sponsored visa ਜਿਹਦੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ, which is the 3 years of work experience. ਜੋ 3 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦਾ work experience ਹੈ that should be post qualification, and you need a positive skills assessment in your nominated occupation for 186 visa. Once you get this visa, you are a permanent resident of Australia. You are as good as any other PR in Australia. So it's a very good visa to have, obviously, if you are eligible for it.
Next one is by Anjana Balakrishnan. Can I get 494 if I have a sponsor, but I only have 2 years of experience and 1 year of internship experience?
Anjana, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Anjana ji, thank you for your question. Yes, you could become, no, the internship might not be eligible. You have to have paid full-time work experience of 3 years for 494 visa. As I was telling earlier, if you do not fulfill the requirements of the 3 year work experience as of yet, you might explore your other visa options such as 482 or a training visa, wherein you can complete the 1 year remaining and then possibly apply for the 494.
Yeah. Next one is, can we apply the 186 visa application while processing the ACS skill assessment? I have more than 8 years experience. Do we need to show all the payment evidence for 186 visa, as it's required only 3 years experience? Only 3 years experience payment evidence is enough.
Only 3 years payment evidence is enough. You will have to get your skill assessment done first and then apply for the 186. So get that done, sorted out from the ACS. And you do not have to necessarily show, obviously, the 8 years experience. The only requirement of the visa is that you show the 3 years working requirement, and you obviously get the full skills assessment done from ACS, and then you'd be able to apply for the 186 visa.
Next one is by Sameer Patel. Criteria for TSS 482 visa, please.
Well, Sameer, the criteria for 482 TSS visa is that you should have at least 2 years of work experience. So if you are lacking that 2 years of work experience as of yet and do not have the time to complete that 2 years of work experience on whatever visa you are on currently, you have the option of applying for a training visa first and complete that 2 year work requirement on the training visa. And then once you get the 2 year work experience requirement, you will be eligible to apply for the 482. Now you need to have the necessary qualifications as well for the occupation that you are nominating in the 482. Sometimes you need a mandatory skills assessment as well for some of the occupations and for some of the countries that you hold the passport for. But it's not mandatory in all the cases, so it will depend what occupation you are nominating and what country you come from, and that will determine whether you need a skills assessment or not. But otherwise, it's just 2 years work requirement and the qualifications for the occupation that you're nominating.
Next one is by Nair. But what about the employer's turnover?
Employer's turnover, first, employer's turnover will determine the SAF levy. So एक टैक्स ਹੁੰਦਾ है ਜਿਹੜਾ कि सरकार ਲੈਂਦੀ है when you're sponsoring foreign workers. Obviously that will get affected by employer's turnover. The employer the turnover 10 million to ਘੱਟ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ 494 ਵਾਸਤੇ let's say they'll have to give $3,000. The 10 million ਤੋਂ ਉੱਪਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ they will have to give $5,000. As far as nominating an employee based on the मतलब ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ कि how much the employer's turnover should be for successfully nominating an applicant. It depends really. I mean, the scope and the scale of the business should be such that they should be able to support your employment for the next 2 years at least in the case of 482. And scope and scale ਦਾ ਕੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਕਿ the scale should be large enough ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ employment fit ਬੈਠ ਸਕੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ salary financials ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੋ ਸਕੇ ਕਿ ਮਤਲਬ ਤੁਸੀਂ pay ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ salary full time employee ਨੂੰ. The scope ਦਾ ਕੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਜੋ duties ਤੁਸੀਂ perform ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ in the employment, they should fit well within the organization, and there should be a genuine need for that position. Like if there's a restaurant and a restaurant is sponsoring an accountant, it might not make a very good sense because sometimes the restaurant might not need a full-time accountant. But obviously that will depend on the scale and scope of the restaurant. If it is a very big restaurant, they might need an accountant as well. And they should be able to sponsor an accountant on the 482.
Or if the same person have different restaurants.
That's right. It depends on the size of the business and the scale and the scope.
Exactly. Next is Hina Qureshi. I'm studying Master of Teaching Secondary Teacher. How can I apply if I can't apply TR as I have already used it? How can I apply for sponsorship straight away after graduation? What are the requirements?
Well, as I said, you cannot apply for employer-sponsored visas straight away without having any work experience. You're doing masters here. If you've done bachelor's from overseas in education, and you can get a successful skills assessment on that basis, and you've got some teaching experience overseas as well, that could be used for the to fulfill the requirement of the work experience for the employer-sponsored visas. Obviously, you will have to fulfill the work experience requirement. Otherwise, you cannot apply for the employer-sponsored visas pretty much straight away.
I think she has been on TR before that.
Oh, she has been on TR?
Yes. So she can't apply TR again.
She cannot apply TR. No, so you'll have to go on to some other visa. You can go on a training visa if you've got the required experience. If you are just very recently completing the Masters of Teaching, then you may not even need the 1 year work experience requirement to go on a training visa. Otherwise, you should explore your options, obviously in the skilled migration category, because teaching is still there in all the lists, in the 189 list as well. So I don't know how many points you're sitting at, but it'll be a good idea to improve your score as soon as possible by giving the IELTS and giving all of the exploring all of the avenues and applying for the 189 EOI as soon as possible.
Sure. Virender Koshal, hello sir, I complete my BSc Agriculture and I have 1 year work experience. Please tell me requirements.
See, Virenderji, you've completed BSc Agriculture. You can get a skills assessment for agriculturist from VETSS if you've got the 1 year work requirement fulfilled already. Now, agriculturist, I believe, is in the WA state list as well. But the thing is that the WA is suspended at the moment. Most of the states are. So unfortunately, it seems like that you will have to wait for the states to reopen properly so that you can get an invitation. But I'm pretty sure that you'd be able to get an invitation once the states reopen. But otherwise, obviously, as I said, you have the option of exploring the employer-sponsored visas. You've already got the 1 year agriculturist agriculture experience. Complete another year, and an employer, if you find an employer who's willing to sponsor you, they should be able to sponsor you after that, because you'll have the skills assessment and you'll have the 2 year work experience requirement as well.
Harpal Sandhu, I'm working as retail supervisor in McDonald's on 457 visa from last 4 years. Am I eligible for 494 or 186?
Harpalji, you are, because this occupation is not on the MLT SSL list, and as I said earlier, 186 requires you to have your occupation on the MLT SSL list. So you might not be eligible for 186, but you would be eligible for 494 as long as you get the skills assessment and fulfill the 3 years work experience requirement. Your employer could sponsor you on a 494, depending on which I think is in Perth, located in Perth.
He didn't mention that.
He didn't mention. So if your employer is located in regional area, they should be able to sponsor you, provided you fulfill all the eligibility criteria for the 494.
Kanav Dhami, if any employer sponsor in Melbourne, do we need to complete the points in the relevant field? You know, as we require points in order to get PR here. And the next one is like, he's just following. One more question is, ABN covers the experience like STFN?
Yes, so the first question first, which is whether he'll need any points for the employer-sponsored visas. So employer-sponsored visa is not based on points. So you do not need any points. You just fulfill the eligibility criteria. And if you find a eligible sponsor who's willing to sponsor you, you should be fine. You do not have to gather points for this particular visa. And what was the second question, sorry?
Does the ABN covers the experience?
Yes. Like, so the experience can be, you can gather the experience while you are self-employed as well. Obviously, you will have to prove your experience by giving various documents. But yes, the experience can be gathered and gained while you are being self-employed.
Samir, can I work at any regional area if I was granted from Tasmania?
Yes, you could. As I said, if you are granted a 491 from Tasmania, I'm assuming. Yes, you could actually go to any region except for Sydney and Melbourne and metropolitan Brisbane. Yes, you can work in any region whatsoever on the 491 and fulfill the conditions for the 191 visa eventually, which is the PR pathway from the 491.
Dilshan, my wife's working as store team member at Woolworths. Is that related to retail supervisor occupation for 482 visa or South Australia Dhamma regional sponsorship?
Thanks. So they said the wife is working as a store
team member at Woolworths.
See, if your wife is just working as a team member in Woolworths, it will depend on a lot of factors. So Dharma in South Australia gives you various concessions. It gives you age concessions. It can give you language concessions. It can give you work experience concessions. But you will still have to prove that you have got the necessary qualifications and the required work experience in the occupation that you're nominating. So let's say you're nominating yourself as a retail manager. You will have to prove that I don't think being a store team member in Woolworths will fit that criteria. So you will have to prove that you've got the required work experience and you've got the skills assessment as well.
Yeah. So it's just the question by Samir, like we have already answered about his question about the regional area. He wants to know if he can start his business as a chef.
Well, you can certainly start your business as a chef. But if you're asking me whether you could sponsor yourself as a chef, you can form a company and that company can possibly sponsor you, but it's very, very rare and it's very, very difficult. So in most of the cases, I would strongly recommend not to do that. If that is the sole purpose of you opening up a business, I would rather suggest finding an employer and getting sponsored that way.
Next one is by Navneet Chatwal. What is the scope for 491 offshore for mixed crop farmer with positive skills assessment with 85 points?
See, at the moment, all of the states are suspended, especially for the offshore sector. So none of the states are inviting anybody from offshore at the moment. So unfortunately, you'll just have to wait it out and we'll see how the states reopen and what criteria do they have and what the points cutoff threshold goes to. At this stage, it is very uncertain and nobody is getting invited from offshore from any of the states at the moment.
Yeah. Next one is by Inder Sangha. I'm in Perth. MPA finished this year. What I need to do next? Can you guide some information about FIA in this course?
ਇੰਦਰ ਡੈਫੀਨਿਟਲੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਸਟੈਪ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸੇ ਸਾਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਐਮਪੀਏ ਫਿਨਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ you apply for the 485 because you would be eligible for the 485 after you finish your masters. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਦੀ skills assessment ਪੂਰੀ ਕਰੋ which can only be done if you have a minimum of 7 each in IELTS or equivalent in PT. Once you get the skills assessment, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਦੇ points gather ਕਰੋ. Depending on whether you have a family member in Australia, you could be eligible for various visas, family sponsored and the state sponsored. ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਆਪਦੀ eligibility ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ expression of interest ਪਾਓ as soon as possible. ਨਾ accountants ਦੀ ਜੋ seats ਹੈ ਉਹ ਥੋੜੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੀ ਘੱਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ ਪਿਛਲੀ allocation ਚ ਤਾਂ I would say ਕਿ make a plan B as well. Accountant ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੀ ਹੈਗਾ, you follow that pathway. Lekin you can study for something else as well, like community worker course or something else just to have a plan B if the accountant option doesn't work out for you. So yeah, just consult a migration agent and start following the steps that you need to follow as soon as possible without wasting any time. That will be my advice to you.
Next one is by Amritpal Singh. I have been working as an ICT support engineer for 2 years now. Am I eligible for 482 and what would the pathway be after that? Will I be needing to file 190 then or 186?
Well, he's been working as an ICT support engineer for 2 years now.
Yes.
So he's definitely eligible for 482 if he's got a positive skills assessment in that occupation as well. Obviously, I'm assuming that he's got the necessary qualifications. So once he gets the 482, he can obviously get it for up to 4 years. And once he gets the 482, he can even once he completes 1 year work experience on the 482 visa, he can apply for the 186 permanent visa if the employer is willing to sponsor him. Yep. But obviously, 190 might be an option for him as well, depending on which state he's applying from, and obviously depending on how many points he's at. So you've got both the options open to you, employer sponsored visa as well as the 190 or 189. But we'll have to know further before we can advise you properly as to where you stand at this point in time.
Next is Jacinta Chandran. Hi, how about for personal care worker? Is there any chance?
Well, personal care worker can get sponsored for 482, but unfortunately there's no other, as it is just on the STSOL list. I don't think there's much scope. You can only get a 482 for 2 years and then you can extend it by further 2 years. I would recommend studying for something else. I don't know what visa you are on at the moment. Studying for some other occupation or working in some other occupation. I don't know what your qualifications are from before. So we can assess your qualification and see whether you might be eligible for some other occupation. And obviously you can get sponsored as a personal care worker as well, but it might not lead to PR pathway in this occupation itself.
Shabo Sheikh, what are the work experience requirements for 186?
So I've already laid that out before. The 186 requires you to have 3 years of highly skilled, highly relevant work experience, which should be post qualification. And you should have a positive skills assessment in the occupation as well that you are trying to nominate.
Binay, I'm working at Disability Service from 1 year at South Australia, Adelaide. Is I'm eligible? What documents we need from employer?
So employers, so obviously he's working for 1 year, did he say?
Yeah, in South Australia.
So yeah, if you're working for 1 year, you need to complete another 1 year of work experience before you'll become eligible for the 482 visa, which requires you to have a minimum of 2 years work experience. So, and obviously, once you get that 2 years of work experience, your employer would be able to sponsor you. So your employer will have to provide documents such as their financials so that the case officer can assess whether they have got the scope and the scale to sponsor you as an employee, as a full-time employee. Obviously, they'll have to prove that they are running lawfully, they are running actively, and all these things we can. So all these things could be proved by various documents such as their ABN registration or ACN registration, their BAS statements, their payrolls, and obviously we'll have to prepare the document for the need of the job and to fulfill the genuine job requirement.
Nihal Singh, which state regional should I target for studying Bachelor of Nursing for PR perspective? Also, family members got New South Wales citizenship.
Okay, so he wants to do Bachelor of Nursing and he wants to know which state he should be going to.
For like in regard to PR.
So if you're just starting your Bachelor's of Nursing, it is very uncertain to say which occupation, which state would have this occupation 3 years from now or 3.5 years from now, because that is how much it's going to take.
It changes after.
It changes. Yeah, it's very volatile. Yes. So it keeps changing. But choose the state. I mean, nursing is a good occupation to have. It's a good study to do. I don't think it's going to go out of demand anytime soon because Australia has a lot of aging population, and we'll need this occupation for a long time. So choose the state, choose the university, choose the look at the quality of the university that you are trying to get admitted into, and you can go to South Australia, Western Australia. Although Western Australia does not have nursing at the moment in its graduate occupation list, but who knows, it might come 6 months from now. And as I said, nursing will. Yeah.
Sorry, he has got his relatives in New South Wales.
So he's got his
family, yeah.
So if they are living in Sydney, he might not be eligible for that family sponsored stream. But if they're living in regional NSW, he's got eligible relatives living in regional NSW. He'd be later on eligible for family sponsored visa as well, which is the subclass 491. But it doesn't matter where he studies from, as long as his relatives are living in regional Australia and they fulfill the criteria for being an eligible relative. That is all that matters. So he could have studied from Sydney itself, but he'd still be eligible for family sponsored visa as long as the relative fulfills the criteria.
Sure. Next is Amrit Sohal. I have been working as an ICT support engineer for 2 years now. I think we have already done that. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Arun Tommy, 186 chances for chef with 7 years of overseas experience and 2 years of part-time experience in New South Wales, direct entry info, please.
Well, yes, chef is in the MLT SSL list. If you've got an employer who's willing to sponsor you, I think you could fulfill all the requirements. You can get a positive skills assessment on that basis as well from VetAssess. Because even if you do not have the qualifications and you have the 6 years of work experience as a chef, you would be able to get a positive skills assessment. Obviously, the evidence should be verifiable, the evidence of employment, I mean. And it seems to me that you fulfill the basic criteria, which is the work experience requirement and the skills assessment requirement. Obviously, we'll have to have a look at the other documents to inform you further, but but obviously you are eligible for 186 direct entry and if you got an employer in Sydney, New South Wales, anywhere in Australia, that is absolutely fine as well.
Jacinta Chandran, she is following up with her previous message. I have completed Certificate 3 in Individual Support and Diploma in Community Services, working as PCA for last 2.8 years, part-time, and currently doing Diploma in Mental Health. Will be finishing by end of December. Yeah. And previously, just to give you an idea, she was asking about personal care worker.
Yeah, yes. Sure. Well, the thing is, it seems to me that she's done Diploma of Community Services before, and she's now doing Diploma of Mental Health as well.
Yes.
See, to me, it seems like it's a good study. You can get a positive skills assessment for the occupational community worker as well. And community worker is in quite a few of the states lists. So you can explore your options there. But I mean, with studies that you're doing, you might not be eligible for 485. Please bear that in mind, because 485 is a good visa to have after you complete your studies, because you can fulfill the necessary work requirement. Because for all these occupations, whether it is community worker or mental health worker, you normally, unless you're doing from very few specific colleges, you normally need 1 year or 2 year of work experience to get the positive skills assessment. So make sure you do some studies which will actually make you eligible for the 485 visa, so that you can actually fulfill that work experience requirement, either for the skills assessment or even for the employer sponsored visas later on.
Praveen Rathi, I was PR in Australia. It was valid till May 2018, but I never went back. I'm in India since 2013. Is there any possibility for me to go back?
Sorry, he was PR here in Australia.
And it was valid till 2018, but he went back to India, and he's in India from 2013.
Okay. So, so you were a PR. I'm assuming that when you got your PR, you made your first entry in Australia, and then you went back. Now, you could be eligible for a resident return visa, depending on various factors, such as what has kept you in India for so long, whether there were compelling and compassionate circumstances involved, those compelling and compassionate circumstances should be for the entire period, and whether there were compelling and compassionate circumstances involved which made you leave Australia as well. So we'll have to satisfy that requirement. You might be able to get 3 months resident return visa, which is a permanent visa as well. Once you enter Australia, you only have the travel rights for up to 3 months, but you can stay in Australia indefinitely. So definitely, sir, I mean, we'll just have to study your circumstances. We'll have to make proper submissions. You could be eligible. You could very well be eligible for a resident return visa, and I definitely recommend that you give it a shot, and do it as soon as possible as well.
Sure. Rajan Rampal, can you please tell me the chances of getting PR as motor mechanic?
See, Rajanji, a motor mechanic is a good occupation to have. It is on the 189 list as well as on the most of the states list as well. But the thing is that the states are suspended for the time being, so they're only inviting critical occupations. But wait some time, and depending on how many points you're standing at, and whether you have any family in Australia, in regional Australia, you could have a pretty good chance in getting your permanent residency. But as I said, we'll just have to wait for the states to reopen properly, and we'll see where you stand at that point in time.
Abdul Rahman, I'm completing Diploma of Building and Construction, and obviously in TR. I'll have to work 1 year to be eligible for PR. But do you recommend get the work experience from regional or in Melbourne? Also, what are requirements for independent or state-sponsored visas? Please guide.
So, Arjun? Was the Abdul. So it doesn't matter where you get your experience from, as far as the employer sponsored visas are concerned, but you might be able to fulfill the state's requirements if you get, let's say you're getting your experience from Darwin. Darwin wants you to have 1 year of work experience in their own state. So let's say you get your work experience from Darwin. You'll fulfill the requirement of your skills assessment as well as the Darwin state sponsorship if you do that from there. So for the states lists, I was just telling earlier, the states are suspended for the time being, but you can still try and fulfill the criteria for various states, which was before the states got suspended. So Tasmania has this criteria where you have to work in Tasmania for 6 months, and you could become eligible for Tasmanian state sponsorship. Or Darwin has this criteria where you work in Darwin for 1 year, you become eligible for NT state nomination. Whenever the states reopen, and if you've already fulfilled this criteria, you've got a good chance that you'll be invited by these such states. Perth doesn't have any such work experience criteria. So for Perth, if you studied in Perth, that's all it matters. You could have your work experience done anywhere, and you could still apply for the WA state sponsorship. So it depends. It depends really which state you want to fulfill the requirement for. So it might be a good idea to study the requirements for each and every state, and see if you want to move to one of the states where you possibly can fulfill the criteria for the state nomination.
Next is by Gus Michael. Can we do partnership in Sydney with somebody else after getting 491 New South Wales? Also, can we open our business at the same address where we are living? Will it be okay in future 191 visa? Can we show this business?
Well, yes, 491 visa, you can fulfill the 3 years work requirement on the 491 visa. You can fulfill by being self-employed. You can do partnership. That's absolutely fine. That has nothing to do with migration, as long as you fulfill the tax obligations and other Australian Companies Act obligations, and possibly obligations under the other laws. It's absolutely fine, as long as you can prove that you were working full time and earning a taxable income of $55,000 a year. That's absolutely fine. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from fulfilling the requirements while you're working in your own business. You could even drive a taxi and you still fulfill the requirement of the 491 visa 3-year work requirement, and be eligible for 191 visa later on.
And another question is, what are the chances New South Wales will start giving nomination of last year applicants which they have kept on hold and have Section 48?
See, I'm not entirely sure what's happening with the Section 40. What's the policy of the New South Wales government as far as the applicants who are barred by Section 48 is concerned? But hopefully things will reopen, and they should make a provision for people who are stuck in Australia due to Section 48 and cannot travel overseas. They should make some lenient provision for those applicants.
Rohan Sharma, I have done certificate 3 in automotive. Which state is best in regard to my occupation train, and what sponsor options I got?
Your occupation, you've done a Cert 3 in automotive, he's saying?
Yes.
So yes, so you need to fulfill the 1-year work requirement. I think as far as the state list is concerned, all those states are suspended at the moment, but it was in the Northern Territories list. It was in the Tasmanian list as well. So you could think of moving to one of these states and fulfill the 1-year work requirement there in these states, so that you can later on be sponsored by these states.
Preetham Shrestha, how long I have to wait for New South Wales 190 chef and in 90 points and 189 in 85 points?
See, chefs are not being invited at the moment. As I said, only critical occupations are being invited. We do not know what the current cutoff is at the moment, but 85 points at 189, I would not say there's a very great chance. Improve your score to 90 points if you possibly do that. With NSW, there's a high chance that you'll be invited once things come back to normal. NSW has recently announced that it'll be opening up regional nominations as well. So have a look at that as well and see if you can get a job offer letter from regional NSW, or you fulfill one of the other criteria that they've mentioned on the website. In that way, you can possibly get yourself invited from there earlier. So yeah, so you just have to wait it out a little bit and possibly improve your scores so that you have better chances.
Herman Mann applied for NT 491 nomination in July. Haven't revived any positive message. Any update on new Northern Territory state? I'm running IT business, registered company with staff hired for 2 years. Do I have any other options as well in any other state?
So if he's in NT, he's opening when the NT might start inviting again. So NT, I'm not 100%, but it seems to me In early next year, Northern Territory may start inviting applicants who fulfill the requirements of their state. That would mean in January or February. So he's done IT. He's got an IT company of his
Yes, and
own.
he has got like staff as well, and he's running that company from 2 years.
So I'll need to know what occupation that you're trying to nominate yourself in. Obviously, the scope will depend. If you've got an IT company, that really doesn't matter. So I'll need to know what occupation you've got the skills assessment in, so that we can possibly tell you which states would be better off for you.
Sushil, what about 482 employer sponsorship visa for telecommunication engineer in Adelaide, currently living and working in Southern Australia?
Well, if you're a telecommunications engineer, you are definitely, if you fulfill the work experience requirement, you're definitely eligible for the 482. And since your occupation is on the MLT SSL list, after the you'll get a 482 for 4 years. And after you fulfill the 3-year work experience requirement, you can possibly transition into 186 as well, which is a permanent employer sponsored visa. And obviously you can try the 189 and 190 as well, for both South Australia and the 189 as well, depending on how many points you have. And so I'd say you've got a pretty good scope with the occupation that you currently have.
Suraksha Subaidi, can you tell me what is requirements for 190 or 491 in South Australia and studying social work?
Well, so South Australia has this current criteria where if you're working in South Australia for 3 months in critical occupations that the state needs, you may get invited. But at this point in time, South Australia is basically suspended for all other occupations. So with social worker, she may have a chance if she's working in South Australia in her own nominated occupation for at least 3 months.
Sure. So that next is by Nikunj Khetani. Hi, I have been working at Swinburne University of Technology for almost 1.5 years now as a research associate in mechanical engineering, advanced manufacturing with industry partners. My 485 will expire in March, and by then I'll have 2 years of experience completed. I am being offered another year of work. What would be the best visa options or pathways?
So I didn't get her occupation properly. What's her occupation?
Research associate in mechanical engineering.
So so she's doing research. If she, I mean, she's working as a mechanical engineer in New South Wales or in Victoria. She's working as.
He has worked in Swinburne University. I have no clue about where it is.
Okay. So so mechanical engineer is in the priority list at the moment. So good chance for 189s, good chance for 190s as well, provided you fulfill the criteria. Victoria is only inviting people in the critical sectors as well, which the criteria for which is that you should have worked in Victoria for at least 6 months. But obviously, whenever the things smoothen up and the states reopen properly, I think you should have a good chance to improve your to get an invitation. Just keep improving your scores, and try for this various states and the 189 EOI as soon as possible.
Next one is by Hanaul Haq. I am planning to do diploma of community service from Perth from accredited college. What is requirement for skill assessment? What will be the chance of getting PR from Perth or on community service?
See, if you're doing a diploma of community services from accredited college in Perth, the only requirement for skill assessment is that you should have studied, you should have done a 2-year diploma. So if you've done that, you should be able to get a positive skills assessment for the occupation community worker. Now, community worker is in the WA state list. So whenever WA state list reopens, you've got a good chance to be to get an invite at around 70-75 points, I would say, going by the past statistics. So yes, so if you're studying from accredited college, your skills assessment should be easy. Just present your qualifications, and it's in the WA state list as well. So you've got a good chance to get an invite later on.
So let's just have another 2 questions. Surjit Singh Sandhu. Hello, sir, ma'am. Hello. I'm on 485 visa, nearly expiring, and in accounting 90 points. I have option for Master of Nursing in Darwin and Sydney. Which one is best? For NT 190 requirement, you should not be on student visa after completing degree and registered as RN. Can I have other option for work visa?
So he's currently on 485 visa. So that means that he cannot get a 485 visa ever again in his life. So if he does Masters of Nursing, he's absolutely right. If he does Masters of Nursing in Darwin, he might not still be eligible for the Darwin state sponsorship because they require you to stay in Darwin for another 6 months after you've completed your education in Darwin for you to become eligible for the state's nomination. So it doesn't really matter where he does his Masters from at this stage. We do not know which state list will start giving preferences to registered nurses after 2 years from now. So he should go to a university where he feels like. I think he's got an equally good chance in any of the universities in Australia because nursing is in the 189 list and it'll remain there. Victoria could be a good option. Victoria has been consistently inviting nurses for the past 1 year. I hope the trend continues. And obviously, nurses have an option of the 491 family sponsored visas as well. So if you've got a family member, you've got the chance there as well. So it depends.
Indrajit Taliwal, I have done Masters of Education in 2013 and I have a 7 years experience. I want to settle in Australia. Please suggest me what should I do. How can I get PR in Australia and suggest me state for it? I guess she's in India.
Yes, so I'm also assuming that they are overseas.
Yeah.
So you've done Masters of Education. If you fulfill the requirements of the skills assessment of a teacher, whether it be a primary school teacher or secondary school teacher, you've got the 7 years work experience as well. So you just have to gather your points for the 189 independent visa. The states are not inviting anybody from offshore at the moment, but 189 is still open. So it depends. So at this stage in time, um, um, teachers are getting invited at around 90 points for the 189 visa. So if you've got the positive skills assessment and you think that you can gather 90 points, you may have a chance. Otherwise, it's a little bit difficult for people who are offshore at the moment to gather so many points because you get 10 points extra for studying in Australia. So you might explore that option of coming to Australia and study here for 2 years as well, so that you get those additional 10 points and become eligible for Australian PR.
Yeah, I think that should be it for today because we are running out of time. And we really apologize if we haven't answered any of your questions. We'll try to answer those through Messenger or we'll just try to pop through some messages. And till then, take care and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.